I never meant to linger in her house that long. At first, it was just a polite visit. I'd been dropping off some papers for the school memorial, something my father asked me to deliver. But the moment I stepped inside, the silence of her living room pulled me in. It wasn't the stiff kind of silence, but the kind that feels alive, as though the walls still carried his voice. My old teacher. Her late husband. She was standing by the window when I entered, her hair catching the last streak of evening light. She turned slowly, almost startled, then gave me a small smile that didn't quite fit on her lips. It was the sort of smile someone wears when they've forgotten how to use it. "I wasn't expecting anyone," she said, her voice soft, worn but graceful. I cleared my throat, suddenly aware of how young I must have seemed in her eyes. "My father asked me to give you these. From the committee." I held out the folder, but she didn't take it right away. Her gaze lingered on me, not unkindly, just longer than most people would. Long enough that my hand felt heavy, awkward. Finally, she stepped closer. Her fingers brushed mine as she accepted the folder, and that brief contact left me unsteady. I looked away quickly, but not before I caught the faint tremor in her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. I should have left then. Instead, I stayed. Something about the way the room felt, the muted ticking of the clock, the faint trace of her perfume in the air, the 2 untouched teacups on the coffee table, made it impossible to walk back out the door. She didn't ask me to sit, but I did. She didn't protest either. "You're quieter than he was," she said after a long pause, settling into the chair across from me. "He filled every space with words." I nodded. "I remember. He never let a silence last more than a second." Her eyes softened, as if that memory was a wound and a comfort all at once. "And yet here we are." With nothing to say. But it wasn't nothing. It was too much. Every time her gaze flicked toward me, I felt an unspoken question pressing in the air between us. I shifted on the couch, unsure whether I should break it or protect it. "You must think it strange," she said finally, "that I let you sit here like this. A student from his past, a boy I barely know." "I don't," I answered too quickly. My voice betrayed me. "I like being here." She studied me then, her head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing in a way that made me wonder if she saw through everything I was trying to hide. I swallowed hard, searching for words that wouldn't make me sound foolish. Her lips curved again, softer this time, almost playful. "You remind me of something I thought I'd forgotten." The way she said it left me unable to breathe. I leaned forward without realizing it, caught somewhere between wanting to ask what she meant and being too afraid of her answer. The room felt smaller. The air heavier. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and for the briefest moment, her eyes flicked down, to my hands, my mouth, before darting back up. Either of us spoke. Then, just as the silence turned unbearable, the doorbell rang. We both flinched. She pressed her lips together, almost guilty, and rose from her chair. I stayed frozen on the couch, pulse racing, knowing everything had already changed, and yet nothing had begun. The doorbell's echo hung in the air longer than it should have. She walked to the door with a steadiness I didn't quite believe. I sat there, my palms pressed against my knees, pretending to study the framed photographs on the wall. When she opened the door, a neighbor's voice drifted in, polite but nosy. I couldn't catch the words, but I saw the way her shoulders stiffened as she answered. She didn't invite them inside. Her replies were clipped, her laugh too thin. After a minute, the door closed, and the silence returned. She leaned against it for a second, eyes closed, breathing as though she'd just run a long distance. "You should probably go," she murmured. I didn't move. "Do you want me to?" Her eyes opened slowly, finding me again. She looked at me for too long, not with the authority of a teacher's widow, not with the distance of someone older, but with the fragility of someone who wasn't sure what she wanted at all. "I don't know," she admitted. It was the first true thing she had said all evening. She crossed the room and lowered herself into the chair again, though not as relaxed as before. Her fingers toyed with the edge of the folder I had brought, as if she needed to remind herself why I was there in the first place. "I was 24 when I met him," she said suddenly. Her voice carried the weight of rehearsed memory. "He was already teaching then, so certain of himself. I thought I'd never be more than the quiet woman at his side. But he loved me loud enough for the both of us." I leaned forward, listening harder than I meant to. "And then?" I asked gently. She gave a half smile that broke before it reached her eyes. "And then one day, the noise stopped. And the silence has been unbearable ever since." I wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled in my throat. All I managed was, "You don't seem unbearable to me." Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, almost accusing. But there was no anger there. Only the ache of someone who hadn't been spoken to like that in a long time. "You're too young to say things like that." She wished her hand in mine should have lasted seconds, but it lingered, either of us ready to move. Her eyes flicked to the window, to the clock, to anywhere but me, as though the world itself might catch us. Then, a sudden knock at the door. She pulled back instantly, almost too quickly, standing as though she'd been caught in a crime. I sat there frozen, my skin still burning from the touch. Through the thin wood, a voice called, "You in there? Thought I saw someone drop by." Her jaw tightened. "It's Margaret," she whispered. "She checks on me." She didn't open the door. She just stood still, waiting, one hand pressed to her chest. The neighbor knocked again, softer this time, then finally left. Only then did she let out the breath she'd been holding. I rose slowly. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She cut me off, voice sharper than before. "This, whatever this is, can't happen. You're too young. You remind me of him. It's wrong." But her voice broke on that last word. I stepped closer, reckless. "I'm not him. You know that." Her eyes darted up to mine, wet now. "That's exactly the problem." The distance between us closed without permission. I didn't even realize I was leaning in until her breath touched mine. She didn't move away. Her lips parted, just slightly, as if caught between protest and surrender. My pulse hammered. Then her phone buzzed on the table. The sound snapped her back. She jerked away, snatched it up, and stared at the screen. I caught a glimpse, her daughter's name. She answered quickly, voice steady but thin. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm fine. Just resting." "No, don't worry." I turned away, guilt knotting in my stomach. Her daughter. My age. Maybe younger. When she hung up, she didn't meet my eyes. "You see?" she whispered, almost to herself. "This isn't just about us. There are people who would never forgive me." "And me?" I asked quietly. Her silence was louder than any answer. The clock ticked on, each second pushing us further apart. But then, she surprised me. She crossed the space between us again, her hand brushing my sleeve this time, not quite a touch, just close enough to feel. "I can't promise anything," she said, voice trembling. "I can't even promise I won't push you away tomorrow. But tonight, I don't want to feel the years between us." I turned toward her fully, meeting her eyes. They were raw, unguarded, and they held me there like gravity. We didn't kiss. We didn't dare. But the space between our mouths felt impossibly thin, charged with everything unsaid. The clock chimed once, breaking the moment, and still we stood there, not touching, not speaking, bound by the silence that threatened to swallow us whole. Paired. I'm old enough to mean them. The room went still. She looked away, biting her lip, as though holding back something dangerous. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "It's not just your age," she said, her voice trembling now. "You were his student. You're—" She stopped herself, pressing her hand to her forehead. God, what would people think? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't care what anyone thought. Her hand slipped from her temple, resting on the arm of the chair, and for some reason, reckless or desperate, I reached across the space and touched it. Just lightly, barely a brush of my fingertips. She froze. Then, slowly, she let her hand turn, her palm open against mine. Not gripping, not pulling away. Just staying. I didn't see her for 3 days. 3 days where I told myself I wouldn't go back, wouldn't circle her street like some lost stray. But on the 4th evening, I was at her doorstep again, rehearsing excuses I knew she wouldn't believe. She opened the door before I even knocked, as if she had been waiting. "You shouldn't be here," she said, though she stepped aside to let me in. The living room was dim, curtains drawn, the air heavy with the smell of untouched tea. I sat down without asking. She remained standing, arms crossed, her distance deliberate. "I keep thinking about that night," I admitted, my voice low. "About what almost happened." Her eyes closed briefly, as if the memory hurt to touch. "So do I. And that's exactly why it has to stop." I leaned forward. "Do you want it to stop?" Her lips parted, then closed again. She turned away, pacing, her hand brushing her hair back in restless motion. "You're a boy with your whole life ahead. I'm a woman who—" She stopped herself, swallowing. "Do you know what people would say if they found out?" I stood now, the distance unbearable. "I don't care about people. I care about you." She froze, shoulders tense. The silence was too thick. I crossed the room until I was standing behind her. My hand hovered near her shoulder, not daring to touch. She spun suddenly, her face inches from mine, her voice breaking. "Why are you doing this to me?" The question hit hard. For the first time, I saw her not as untouchable, not as my teacher's widow, but as a woman standing on the edge of something terrifying. "Because I can't stop," I said, almost desperate. "Because every time I try to stay away, I end up here. Because I see you." Her eyes shone, tears threatening. She shook her head, whispering, "You don't know what you're saying." But her hands betrayed her. They trembled as they reached out, catching my wrist as though testing whether I was real. The contact ignited something raw between us. She pulled back quickly, shaking, but I caught the flicker in her eyes, desire, fear, longing all tangled. Then she whispered, almost angrily, "I hate how you make me forget my age." Her words stopped my breath. The air in the room tightened, thick with everything unspoken. I stepped closer, reckless now. "Then forget it," I said. "Just tonight. Forget everything else." For a moment, she looked at me like she might break, or burn. Her chest rose and fell, her lips parting, her hand lifting slightly as though to touch my face. And then a sound. The creak of the front gate. Footsteps approaching the door. We both froze. Her hand hovered inches from me, her eyes wide, breath caught, and then the knock came. In that fragile contact, I felt more than I'd ever been able to say out loud. The knock rattled through the silence, sharper this time, urgent. She drew back from me as though burned, her hand flying to her chest. "Stay here," she whispered, though the fear in her eyes told me she wasn't sure that was possible. I sank into the couch, every nerve tight, as she opened the door. It was her daughter. I recognized her instantly from old photos, younger than me by a year or two, with the same eyes but brighter, unclouded. She stepped inside without waiting, her voice spilling out in a rush. "Mom, I tried calling. You didn't answer. I was worried." Her gaze flicked to me. Froze. Oh. The weight of that one syllable nearly crushed me. Her mother, this woman who had been trembling only moments ago in my shadow, stiffened, her voice too calm. "He was just dropping something off from the committee." But the girl's eyes narrowed, sharp and suspicious. "At this hour?" I forced myself to stand, my throat dry. "I should go," I said quickly, trying to sound casual. "No," her daughter shot back, her voice too quick, too defensive. "Stay. I want to know why you're here." The silence that followed was unbearable. I could feel her mother's pulse in the air, quick and panicked. Finally, she stepped in, her tone firm but wavering. "Enough." He was being kind, that's all. Nothing more. But even as she said it, her voice faltered. She wasn't convincing anyone, least of all herself. Her daughter looked between us, suspicion tightening into something sharper. "You're lying," she said flatly. The word cut through me like glass. I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, but my body betrayed me, the heat in my face, the way I couldn't look at either of them. Her daughter turned back to her, eyes glistening now. "After everything with Dad? You'd do this?" The widow's breath caught, her lips trembling, but she didn't speak. Not denial. Not confession. Just silence. That silence was louder than anything. I felt guilt crash over me, hot and suffocating. I opened my mouth, desperate to defend her. "It's not," but her mother lifted a hand sharply, cutting me off. Her eyes, full of fear, regret, and something deeper, begged me not to speak. The daughter shook her head slowly, stepping back toward the door. "I can't even look at you right now." And just like that, she was gone. The door slammed, and the sound echoed in the hollow space she left behind. The woman stood there, unmoving, her hand pressed against the wood as if she could call her back. "I've ruined everything," she whispered, so low I almost didn't hear it. I wanted to tell her she hadn't. That it wasn't too late. But the truth was, the damage had already begun. And yet, as she turned back to me, her face streaked with tears, she reached for my arm with a desperation that was impossible to mistake. Her grip was trembling, almost frantic. "Don't leave me tonight," she said. The words hung in the air like a confession that couldn't be undone. Her hand gripped my arm so tightly I could feel her pulse racing beneath her skin. The room seemed to close in on us, shadows stretching, silence pressing down, the ghost of the slammed door still echoing. "I shouldn't have said that," she whispered, but she didn't let go. I searched her face, raw and streaked with tears. "Then say something else. Say what you really want." Her eyes darted away, toward the framed photo of her husband on the mantel. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Then, almost breaking, "I don't want to be alone anymore." The words cracked something open in me. I wanted to tell her I'd stay, that I'd take the weight from her shoulders, that age and names and history didn't matter. But I hesitated, the guilt heavy in my chest. "Your daughter," I started. "She'll hate me," she cut in, her voice trembling. "She'll hate me no matter what I do. But this—" She looked back at me now, her eyes burning with a wild mixture of fear and hunger. "This isn't about her." The admission shook me. It was the first time she stopped fighting herself. I stepped closer, my hand brushing hers, tentative but deliberate. She didn't pull away. Instead, she lifted her free hand and pressed it against my chest, as if to steady herself against what she was about to do. "I've been living in silence for so long," she whispered. "And then you walk in, and I can hear myself again. Do you understand what that means?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Because I feel it too." Our breaths tangled. Her forehead leaned against mine for a moment, that felt like surrender. No words, no logic, just the fragile truth of two people breaking open in the same space. "I'm terrified," she admitted, her lips so close I could feel the tremor of her words. "So am I said. "But I'm still here." Her eyes closed, and then she kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't cautious. It was desperate, messy, full of years unsaid and walls collapsing. My hands shook as I held her, afraid she'd vanish if I loosened my grip. She pulled back only long enough to look at me, her voice ragged. "If we do this, we can't go back." "I don't want to go back," I said. For a heartbeat, the choice was made, love over fear, truth over silence. And yet, as we stood there in the wreckage of what had just happened, the sound of her daughter's car pulling into the driveway shattered the fragile air. She froze. Her hand slipped from mine. The terror returned to her face, but the kiss lingered on her lips. Neither of us spoke. We just stared at each other breathless, knowing we had crossed a line that could never be erased. And the question hung unspoken between us, now that we had stepped over, would we survive what came next? The sound of the car outside pinned us both in place. She stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides, while I felt my pulse thunder in my throat. Any second, the door would open. Any second, the fragile world we built inside these walls would collapse. She moved first. Not toward the door, not toward me, but toward the mantel, where the photo of her late husband stood. Her fingers brushed the glass frame, and for a moment she looked so small, so breakable, I wanted to take all her pain away. But when she turned back, there was no running left in her eyes. "I can't hide this anymore," she said quietly. I swallowed hard. "From her?" "From myself." The words landed heavy. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the tears still clinging to her lashes. "I've lived years convincing myself that my life was already written. That I was done feeling things like this. And then you showed up, and I hated you for it. Because you made me want again." I didn't know what to say. I just reached for her hand, and this time, she let me hold it without hesitation. "She may never forgive me," she whispered, "but I can't keep choosing silence just to look respectable. If that makes me selfish, then so be it." I squeezed her hand. "Then let me be selfish with you." Her laugh broke through her tears, small, shaky, but real. It was the first sound of hope I'd heard in her since the night I walked through her door. The front door creaked. Her daughter's voice called faintly from the hallway, uncertain, searching. We didn't move, not right away. We stood together, hands joined, as if daring the world to catch us in the act. Finally, she pulled back, wiping her face quickly, trying to compose herself. But she didn't let go of me until the very last second. That night, after her daughter went upstairs, we sat in the living room again. Not touching, not speaking much. Just sitting in the heavy quiet that, somehow, no longer felt unbearable. I knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be fights, questions, moments where both of us doubted what we were doing. But there was also something else, the unshakable truth that we had stepped into something real, and neither of us wanted to step back out. When I left, she walked me to the door. Her voice was soft but steady. "Tomorrow, I'll be afraid again. But tonight, thank you for giving me this." I kissed her hand before I left, a small, trembling promise of everything we couldn't yet say out loud. The night air felt different when I stepped outside, heavy, uncertain, but alive. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the silence.